Veronica EQ here for you, and I'm going to into a little bit more in this series about how and why wine was so crucial and integral in my perspective about the spiritual realm as just such an amazing teacher. Such an amazing teacher. So before I talked about perspective with wine and, being aware of its significance in human history as well as to us as individuals. But another thing that really came forth was when you're in a wine tasting environment. So I know this is going to sound a little odd because you're, maybe here for your spiritual dose for the day, your saged insight, but this does correlate. So walk with me on this. When you go to a wine tasting, you're in for an experience. And Americans especially have a little bit of a struggle with this because we're very oriented towards what we like and what we don't like. And you may have heard me say this before, but I really encourage people to be aware of, your preference or it's not your preference. Because we need some grace in being able to change that. So why I bring that up is our palates actually change every 7 years approximately. It's why you can think about like those foods you didn't like when you were younger that you maybe like now. Mine was mushrooms. I could not stand mushrooms when I was little, but I love them now. And then I freaking loved carrots when I was younger to the point where I almost turned orange one time eating them so much. And now like if they're shredded and on my salad, I'm okay with them, but I do not go for carrots. Like, it's not my go-to. If they're on a plate with hummus, I'm using the carrot to get the hummus, not because I want the carrot. So our palates do change. So this is actually going into a really important point of when you're doing wine tasting, it really isn't about like or don't like. It's more about preference or not your preference and giving your space and self that room and evolution to change, to revisit something to see if you've changed. And it's okay if you haven't. But you'll find if you go into life with a like, don't like, we become so rigid. And there's also judgment that gets attached to that because I would see that a lot as the sommelier for people or pouring wine for them that I'd say like, I like this wine. And I noticed, and that was early on when I was pouring wine, people would feel bad if they didn't like it themselves because I was the educated one and I knew better. But it had nothing to do with whether or not the wine was quality. It was more about preference, and I'll go definitely more into our preference does not always mean quality. But I just really wanted to emphasize that awareness here. When we're engaging in life and you kind of take more of that approach of it's an experience, and I am going to talk more about that, and that it has to do with preference, then all of a sudden things become a lot lighter, a lot easier. And we're not in as much resistance because if something unpleasant is happening, we can say, okay, this is just an experience. I'll give you an example. I took a trip and I got brand new tires. It was a nice big hit. But important, new tires are good. You need good tires when you're traveling, and I drive a lot. So I got new tires and I took a trip and I came back, and this morning my tires were low. And I was already late and already in kind of a weird mental headspace. I just could not get my head screwed on this morning for whatever reason. And I could resist and hate the fact I have to go get my tires checked. Or I could just say, okay, this is an experience and this does need to be addressed before I drive to get to work because my work is not exactly close by to where I live. So for my safety and well-being, let's do this and get over it and move on. And lo and behold, it was probably because I was traveling at higher elevations this past couple weeks that my tires were low because I just got them relatively recently. But it was just nice to be reminded of that. Like I could see where in the past I would have been in resistance because my preference was to get up and go, do what I normally do, be on the ball, not have to deal with my tires. But it was just an experience. So I encourage you to start taking that perspective. Preference, not a preference. And again, right now. Add that right now. We've talked about that before, that right now. I'm feeling sad for the moment. I'm feeling sad right now. Knowing that gives you the grace then that it can change. So that's, again, a little bit of a switch. One of those things I learned from the wine industry, but I wanted to throw it out there because it's so important. So thank you so much for joining, and especially in this wine video series that I'm doing. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.